Greetings and welcome everyone here in the loft. Wonderful. Thank you those out there in Zoom land and those of you watching the recording to this next in the series of the Egyptian energy science. This is the fifth in the series. Started back in January and I'm going to end in July. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but tonight is called Egyptian magicians, and it's been very exciting preparing for this over the last month and getting into the magic of the world. Oh, what's that? A rabbit in a hat? No, that's this was actually one of my first books when I was a boy, because I was into magic as a boy. But this is not what we're going to be getting into tonight. This is about creating illusions and trying to trick and fool people, which I did as a boy. This was actually the first book I got when I was about 10. 400 tricks you can do. But no, we're not going in that direction tonight. Actually, going to be looking more in the line of this classic book by Eliphas Levi, The History of Magic, and how really all cultures of the past through all time and even today still have this interest and practice of magic. It's something that has been part of all cultures, but something kind of hidden or esoteric, you might say, not always out front. But our theme, of course, with the series has been Egypt, and the Egyptian culture certainly has its element of magic, which is in some ways attributed to the character Hermes Trismegistos. Hermes Trismegistos, thrice great. 3 times great or majestic. He was great because he was considered a king. He was considered a philosopher or teacher. And he was also considered a magician priest. And priests back then, and even to a certain extent today, are the ones that carried this impulse of magic in culture. They were the ones that really studied nature and the nature of the physical world, the planet, but also of the cosmos, to understand the secrets and to utilize them within their magical practices, which we're going to be looking at this evening. And the Egyptian magical practices are sometimes referred to as Hermeticism. Hermeticism named after Hermes Trismegistos. And sometimes we refer to things as being hermetically sealed, because magic needs to be held in a particular way. It needs to be contained and practiced in something of a sealed container, which will become an interesting theme tonight, to understand Hermeticism and this sealing of things in order to work with so-called magical forces, to manipulate them to, I don't like the word manipulation when it comes to working with forces of Earth and cosmos, but harness, really to harness these things through an enlightened understanding of them. And, to come to understand these things more and more, as we did with electricity, for example. Electricity is something fairly new. Understanding of the Earth and of the cosmos. But is it really new? That's an interesting point in tonight's theme. Or is it just actually being rediscovered? Was electricity rediscovered and was part of the lost knowledge and wisdom of the past? So what does it sound like when we talk about discovering aspects of nature, physics, chemistry, so forth, kind of sounds like technology, right? To harness electricity, to harness water, to harness the wind. This is technology. And technology literally means etymologically to craft or to weave or to fabricate. So technology is when humans take things and start to craft and harness and do something with them. And if we were to take some of the technology we have today and we're be able to show it to people from 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, they'd probably go, that's magic. Like, how does that smartphone work? How does that computer work? How do you get that airplane to fly? That's magic. They would look at it and think our technology is magic. And conversely, the technology of the past, you know, for example, when we look at the Great Giza Pyramid, we should really look at it and go, that's magic. Like, technology is magic. It's doing something to harness the forces of the earth and the cosmos. But for some reason, there's still an insistence by historians and Egyptologists that the Great Giza Pyramid is just a great big tomb. A great big tomb for a pharaoh with a great big ego. And that's all it is. That there's nothing more going on there. There's a resistance to embrace looking at it as some sort of technology or some sort of magic. And there's good reason for that too, that there is this fear and resistance, because when it comes to these sorts of things, you know, and I got into this last month when I did the talk on the Great Giza Power Plant and looked at the work of Christopher Dunn, that the Egyptologists, they don't even want to consider that all these chambers and passageways had some sort of function. And they want to, like, that it was advanced technology. They want to actually sanitize the picture down so, like, it's less advanced, that the Egyptians were less advanced than us. They were not as developed as we are in our science today. So what happens is they reduce the ideas to really quaint and antiquated superstition. It's just quaint and antiquated superstition. And that's really what magic or this old technology is. It's just kind of quaint and antiquated superstition. It really didn't have any power. And part of the problem is that, you know, Egyptologists are scientists, and scientists are trying to look at things objectively. So they stand outside of it. They stand outside of the picture. They try to look at it objectively, to observe it, to describe it, to catalog it, and do what scientists do, standing outside and looking at it objectively. And the problem is they do everything except enter into it. They don't enter in to the picture and into the possibilities and even into the practices. They don't try these things out. If you tried these things out, what would you be? You wouldn't be a scientist. You'd be a mystic. You'd be a mystic, because the mystic is the one who tries to enter into it, into the phenomenon through experience, to get into it and to understand it from the inside out. So the problem is our science and our Egyptology is on the outside looking at it, and as a result, we've got this dumbed down, sanitized, de-spiritualized picture of things. But we need the rise of the mystic, and we're going to get into some of that tonight to understand things from the inside out. There's also another reason why there's this resistance is the fear of magic. You know, just as there's a fear of technology, new technology, there's a fear of magic. And there's good reason for that. I mean, if you read this book on the history of magic, you can see that magic, just like technology, can be used or abused. It can be used for good purposes, altruistic purposes, serving humanity, or it can be used for self-serving, which ultimately becomes evil. If it's just one person or one group of people trying to hold something for self-serving purposes, then it truly can become manipulative of others. And so, the idea of black magic or evil magic is very real. And this is one of the reasons why people fear it and don't want to enter into an understanding of it and don't want to play with it. Which brings up the question of the moral piece, which I just want to put out at the very beginning here as we go down this road, is the moral piece of the puzzle and how important that is as part of our culture and society. And we consider that the moral piece of when employing magic as well as technology. And in the past, this moral piece was really governed by the priesthood, right? It's really the religious aspect of society, which is really on the decline now to a large degree. But in the past, they were more at the forefront, and they were the ones that guided the morality, and often through mythology. This is a lot of what the power of mythology was, to put these pictures, these ideas, these stories, these images into the dream consciousness of the people, so those images would guide the morality really of the heart being the moral center of our being, where our feeling realm and our conscience is there guiding us. And so the priesthood in the past were the ones that govern this, and if people were developing themselves as initiates to become part of the priesthood or to become a pharaoh or things like that, they would have to go through moral testing and to see if they could be trapped and tricked through temptation and illusion. It would be a testing of the conscience of the heart, test of humility, a test of emotional intelligence. If the person really had that capacity to take on more power. And this is why there's kind of the occult rule, the 3-to-1 rule, that for every one step you make in your acquisition of power, be it, magic or even technological power, you have more power than other people. For every one step you take in that direction, you need to be taking 3 steps in the development of your character, the strengthening of your character, your moral fiber, your integrity. And so, yeah, that's why in the past they had these images of the myths of Isis and Osiris and Horus, and how Set, was set against Osiris. And of course, Set became Satan, the devil, in the Abrahamic religions and so forth. But we've lost that. We're losing that in our culture. And it's a bit of a concern when you look at our modern technology and how powerful that's getting. Talking to a neighbor the other day, I said, what's going on? I learn the news from my neighbors. I don't watch the news. I just find out, what's the most important thing in the news these days. And this concern around not only chat GPT, but now this other thing called auto GPT, which is really short for autonomous GPT, where it's now has the capacity to be autonomous. And a lot of leaders and scientists are speaking out because of this growing power of AI, growing very quickly. And AI doesn't necessarily have a moral conscience. It's, algorithms and programs and things that have been programmed into it. And so there's actually a strong cry right now and fear around this, and a call for, halting this development for at least, months until some laws can be implemented. Laws on what kind of code can be programmed into these things, because the scenario is scary of what could happen. So the point being is that, yeah, the moral piece has to be brought into it if we're really going to advance ourselves with technology and the old technology of the past, the magical energetic sciences that the Egyptians had. So we're going to look a little bit at, first of all, the kind of more conventional Egyptological ideas. I've been reading a couple of books by Wallace Budge, and he is considered a foremost Egyptologist. Died in the 1930s, but he worked in Britain, was the head of the Egyptological department of the British Museum, and made many trips to Egypt to acquire artifacts from Egypt, and wrote up a lot about it, including these books I've been reading: Egyptian Ideas of the Afterlife and Egyptian Magic. And he was eventually knighted for his work. Sir E.A. Thomas Wallace Budge. It's quite a name. If you ever want to sound really, change your name to Sir E.A. Wallace Budge. Yeah, so within this book here on Egyptian magic, he lists a number of different things that, from his research, and pretty much in the mainstream idea of Egyptian magic, looking at it from the outside. One of the main practices was using magical names, right? To have a special name that you would only use in special occasions. You would say it, you would repeat it, and so forth. The names of gods, right? And many, I don't know how many Egyptian gods there are, but in fact, there's really only one. For the most part, contrary to what it looks like, Egypt was monotheistic. They really just believed in one main god, and that was Ra, the god of the sun, the god of light, Ra. And all the other gods were considered appendages, limbs, members of the one god, Ra, the god of light, the god of the sun. And so, yeah, to use magical names, naming the different gods through chants, through spells, through incantations, you would conjure up the power of a particular appendage of Ra, a certain aspect, a certain personality. These were also referred to as netters, gods or netters that all kind of oversaw particular parts, places, things, events, festivals, and so forth in Egypt. And the second thing is the use of pictures. They would have pictures. You've got names and you've got pictures of the gods, and they all have different characteristics. Some would have the head of an ibis, or a head of a falcon, or a head of a jackal. Also shapes. And of course, when you start to get into shapes, then you start to get into different qualities of vibration. So, this isn't so much, that's kind of my piece coming from a different direction, which we'll get into, but, everything vibrates differently depending on its shape. And it's not only about different vibrations in terms of, oh, this is like, 512 hertz and so forth, but every vibration has a different quality as well, which you could say is like a different personality. So it's the manifestation of a different face of the one god, Ra. And third of all, these things were often put onto stones, painted on the stones or carved on the stones, so they'd be kind of in stone, right? They'd be made more permanent in stone, which were called magical amulets. That the amulet would be imbued with the quality of that god, their name, their shape, their vibration, their characteristics. And then from there, the fourth piece is there'd be, formulaic chanting, or the casting of spells. where the names and praise and offerings would be chanted and spoken by the priesthood, priests who had prepared themselves to, well, they could imbue an amulet by chanting over it with the spell repeated over and over again. A fifth thing that Wallace Budge speaks of is magical figures. They would actually shape figures in wax. Could be, of a god or of a person. And through that, they could then imbue the energy into this wax figure. And these could be made to attract the power of that god. If you had that present with you, you could attract its power. Or they were sometimes used to create these figurines. If they were going to battle, for example, they would shape the figurines of themselves and their enemy, and they would play out the scenario in wax as a way to invoke magical forces to win and to destroy the enemy. So we're kind of moving in a direction where we're doing things physically to create things non-physically. We'll get there. But then the sixth thing is magical ceremonies. Like to have a full-blown ceremony that would involve different rituals that would be repeated over and over again to build up a particular quality of energy. So this would be like in initiations. When someone's being initiated from one state of consciousness to an elevated state of consciousness, there'd be this repetition of a ritual with all the different components that I just mentioned as part of the ceremony. And also mummification, which I'd love to get into more, but we won't get into that tonight. Mummification is a very interesting subject to understand the whys and wherefores of that, but it was more than just wrapping a corpse in bandages. There was a whole, the mummy was the center of the whole ritual, really to invoke magic with different purposes. And then seventh thing would be, in these rituals, there was often offerings. You would be offering food up to a higher power and chants and praise and worship. But it's interesting to note that this heart pouring out to something higher was really to create a circuit with the higher and the lower, because when you offer up and you empty out, you actually create a space where something can come in. Something of the higher can then return into that space. So they got very good, obviously, at being able to focus their rituals and their intentions on something higher through particular rituals, so something higher could then come down into them. And this is one of the reasons why Egypt had such longevity, why it lasted so many thousands of years compared to what we're doing. It's because they employed magic. It gave them the power to continue going. They had a momentum of circuitry between the physical realm and the higher realms. And that included also their work with the dead, the so-called dead. And have to, of course, mention, the Book of the Dead. This is a compilation of spells, magical spells, that really were written over hundreds of years. It's not like this just got written, by one person over a year. This is a compilation of things that were written by initiates and the priesthood over time. And it's called the Book of the Dead. That's what Egyptologists call it. But really, in truth, its name is the Book of Coming into the Light of Day. Why it seems so opposite, calling it the Book of the Dead and the Book of Coming into the Light of Day is sort of another subject, but just shows how Egyptology, what happens is whoever discovers something, they get the right to name it. That's the way it works in science. If you discover something, then, you get to name it. Like our sphincter is called sphincter because Dr. Sphincter discovered it. And so now we've got our, no, I'm just kidding. There is no Dr. Sphincter. But that's the way it works. If you discover something, you can decide what it is and what it's called. So, yeah, so there's a lot that Egyptology can't answer and science can't answer, but new sciences like biogeometry can answer. And biogeometry is a modern spiritual and vibrational science. It's a vibrational science and a spiritual science together. And right now there's a lot of enthusiasm and interest in vibrational science and the power of sound and so forth. So we're kind of catching up with the Egyptians on that front, but it also needs to be combined with a renewed interest in spiritual science, because the two need to go hand in hand. And that's what biogeometry is. And you've probably heard me talk about biogeometry, and started by Dr. Ibrahim Karim. Biogeometry is an actual, I guess, copyrighted name. Dr. Ibrahim Karim was the son of a very famous Egyptian architect. And Dr. Karim was following in his footsteps, his father's footsteps, but then ended up making a right turn, went through some interesting, mysterious connections, which I won't go into this evening. He found that he inherited this legacy of research that had been done and knowledge that had been lost, that connected to ancient Egyptian mystery wisdom. And so with his life, the past 50 years, this is his third book that just came out, celebrating 50 years. It's called Hidden Reality: The Biogeometry Physics of Quality, the Science of Subtle Energy and Life Force, 50-year anniversary of biogeometry. Very exciting. This just came out. But his first book, Back to a Future for Mankind, because he's bringing vibrational science and spiritual science together. And then the second book that came out is Biogeometry Signatures, harmonizing the body's subtle energy exchange with the environment, working with shapes, working with numbers, working with what he calls nature's design language, to be able to harmonize energy, support biological life, not only human life, but animals and plants. And a lot of interesting research and work has been done over the past 50 years to show that this magic of the past and this quaint and antiquated technology ain't so quaint and antiquated, but important for the future of mankind. So it's been very exciting for me to study this. Started studying it back in maybe 2009, and it's taken up a big place in my life daily and in my home and so forth. It's just a natural part of the way I live now, because need these things in order to, well, as he calls it, live with excellence. To live with excellence, we need all the stuff we can. So what is it? What is this about? And this starts to take us into some interesting territory here, and the actual doing of things. You could say it is working on the physical level, physical space, to affect things in the counter space, or the non-physical. Science of working with physical things in the space to affect the counter space, or the non-physical, the hidden reality. as he calls it. So you could say the counter space is kind of next to this 3D space, but they affect each other. They affect each other. So this counter space, you could say, is the vibrational space. The vibrational space that is in and around physical space. And some people even refer to it as the etheric realm, the ethers. So you could say that the magical arts are really the etheric arts. It's mastering working with the ethers. And we can talk about the arts for a moment, because there's something magical about the arts. What happens when you do art? Say you do something physical, like you move as a dancer, or you paint, or you sculpt, or you sing. You're doing something with physical instruments, your body or paintbrushes and so forth. Or even, the Egyptian power poses we did at the beginning, physically we hold our hands this way, and then we held our hands this way, and maybe you noticed a different quality of energy based on the position, the angle, and so forth. So something in this physical space is affecting something in the counter space. That's kind of what magic is in a nutshell. Something in the counter space, the etheric space, where you can feel it. You feel it, not as an emotion per se, but you feel it with higher senses than just the physical senses. You're not feeling it like touching, oh, I feel you touching my skin. You're feeling something that's beyond the skin. So using higher senses to function in this counter space. And I'll use the example of a painter. A painter is not just painting a painting to put on the wall. I paint it, and okay, it's done, it's on the wall, there's the painting, and that's it. No, there's also something else going on, and probably the more important aspect of it is what they do to themselves while painting. They're painting out there, but it's actually something's going on inside in the counter space that they feel with their higher senses. They're being fed, they're being built. And this is why painters and other artists have to do it. It's like an addiction. They have to feed themselves on that layer. They have to paint. They don't care about the painting on the wall. They sell it, they never see it again. Some people take their artwork and they burn it because it's not about the end product. That's just a vehicle for doing the magic on this other level. And that, at the end of the day and at the end of their life, is what they take away, what they developed on this other layer of their being, what's being impacted and imprinted in their counter space. So this brings us back to Egypt and what I was calling the lower mysteries when I did the talk a couple of months ago on Egyptian initiation, or what I called ignition, where, the lower mysteries, where they engage with practices. They would do art, they would learn dance, they would learn diet, they would learn all sorts of physical things as preparation for initiation. Even the artisans that would be painting on jars or painting on walls, the hieroglyphs, the scribes writing out in words, ideas and names and things like that. This engaging in the lower mysteries was an indirect way to connect with the higher levels of being. It was an indirect way to connect with the spiritual world. It was being done through the medium of the arts, you could say, that was preparing them. And this is why Hermes Trismegistos, by the way, here's a book I've been reading, The Quest for Hermes Trismegistos. Quite an interesting book, good writer. Gary Lockman used to be the bass player for Blondie. Now he's writing all sorts of great books on esotericism. I have quite a number of his books. Really good esoteric writer. Writing about Hermes in that one. And of course, Hermes is known as the author of the Green Tablet. But the Green Tablet encompasses the Hermetic wisdom, the Hermetic magic. And one of the main sayings in Hermeticism is, as above, so below, right? As above, so below. What is above? What is above the physical? Well, quite simply, the non-physical. As above, so below. And conversely, as below, so above. What we do below can impact the things above. What we do in the physical space, this is what we've been saying, what we do physically is going to have an effect, it's going to have an imprint on the above, the etheric, if you will. And then conversely, the things in the unmanifest realm can come back down. That's what I was saying when they did these rituals and they offered things up, it's still something could come down through them into the world. And this is why their magic lasted, made the Egyptian civilization last so long. It reminds me of a saying of Jesus in the Gospels, where he said, "Verily, verily, verily, I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." He's saying the same thing, as above, so below, as below, so above, that we can have this power to interact with the magical etheric realm of things which all exist, all patterns and possibilities exist that can transform matter. It's the same thing with the Lord's Prayer. Lord's Prayer is something of a Christian magic. Listen, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Bring down into the earth as it is in heaven. Bring the kingdom, the higher, down into earth. It's Christian magical spell. And then at the end of it, what do you say at the end of the Lord's Prayer? Amen. Right. Amen. Well, what's Amen? That's actually one of the names of an Egyptian god. Amen. He's one of the aspects of Ra. Amen and Atum and Atum and so forth. They're all appendages. So when you say the Lord's Prayer, you're doing kind of an Egyptian magical spell. And then at the end, you say this Egyptian God's name. So it just shows how much current spirituality is informed from ancient Egypt, wisdom and esotericism. Have to mention in passing feng shui. Feng shui, which is Japanese wisdom, but of course it's just innate wisdom around the art of placement. Feng shui is the art of placement, where you put things in a certain place, in a certain way, a certain proportion, and sometimes it has to be at a certain time. The art of placement, so that you call in, you gather good energy, or what they say, good luck. You want good luck, you have to do things like that. Like in feng shui, you put your toilet seat down. You don't want to have this empty hole as an energy hole that sucks energy out of your home. Things like this. Proper placement, so things are in balance and harmony and brings blessings. And that changes the quality of energy in the space. Science is all about the quantity of energy, but we're talking about, as he says here on the front of the book, biogeometry, physics of quality. At the end of the day, that's what you care about. It's the quality, right? Not the quantity, but the quality of energy in your life that you feel. Also, yeah, moving ahead, talking about the placement of stones on the earth. These monolithic stones that are found in different places all over the earth, including stone towers. I was reading some interesting stuff here in this book on paramagnetism. Paramagnetism, and it talks about rediscovering nature's secret force of growth, and how in Ireland there's all these round stone towers placed in different areas that nobody can figure out what they are. Like, are these towers where people would run and hide when an enemy comes? No, they're just these small towers. Like, running into a tower from an enemy is not going to do anything. They're going to die there. These were collectors of ambient electromagnetism in the environment to concentrate it into, by the shape, it was concentrated and then dissipated into an area. So there'd be heightened forces for really the agriculture in the area and the livestock and for the people. They had this wisdom about how shape and position and so forth could concentrate beneficial forces for life. Same thing with the Egyptian temples and pyramids. Stone towers. They're not tombs. They are, in some ways, paramagnetic collectors of forces that heighten the life force. And why? What is the ultimate aim of this? What is the point of, heightening the life force and longevity and quality of life? We'll go back to the very first talk I did in January. In a word, consciousness. So there can be a place where consciousness can reside, can come into the earth. So it can be held and help with the transformation and evolution of the earth. That's what it's all about. That's the bow thrust of evolution, is this development and evolution of consciousness. And that's really what the pyramids are about, and the Great Giza Pyramid in particular was the heightening of these life forces and then also astral forces, so there can be heightened consciousness amongst the people, amongst the priesthood, and amongst the initiates, and ultimately the pharaoh, who sat really at the top of the civilization. And the word pharaoh, interestingly, is great house. Pharaoh means the great house. And that's what these pyramids were. That's why these pyramids are attributed to the pharaohs, because they're the great house that are there, perhaps, as tributes to the pharaohs, but not tombs for the pharaohs, but attributed to the great house of the pharaoh and the consciousness that they held on behalf of the people. So this is part of the problem with the the Great Giza power plant theory that I talked about last month. Like, to reduce, like, it's a great idea and people are really excited. There's tons of YouTube videos about pyramids are power plants for free energy and wireless electricity and stuff like that. And it's like, there's problems with that because it's mechanized. It's just reducing it to something that's mechanical, and not talking about life and consciousness. So tonight, after those brief introductory remarks, we're going to look at the work of somebody else who I looked at about 6 years ago. And some of you might have been here. I'm not sure. I got into the work of James Ernst Brown. Very fascinating and much closer to home, in my opinion, his work. Matter of fact, he put out 3 books. This first one's called The Electric Ancient Egyptians. This is just the cover of the book. And then he put out one called Fire in the Middle, which is what pyramid means. Fire in the middle, pyramid. And then the third one is Giza's Industrial Complex, where he does look at some of the mechanical aspects. But what I'm going to do tonight is just some selections from this first one. So there's the this book that we're looking at tonight. Actually, I did 3 talks. This was 6 years ago. You can go on YouTube and you can see the 3 talks. And then the third one, I actually interviewed him from his office in Boulder, Colorado, or somewhere in Colorado, and had a wonderful conversation with him. He's like, to me, he's a hero. He went to Egypt in the 70s when he was a young guy with his camera. It wasn't a digital camera, just an ordinary camera, and he photographed everything. He was just like totally into it as a young man, and acquired all his pictures and knowledge about it. And now in his 70s, he decided to publish these 3 books with some really interesting ideas. So there's the back of the book, and there's a picture of him today, James Ernst Brown. And yeah, some of the critical acclaim around this. So just jumping into chapter 2, talking about static electricity, a natural form of energy, and how it occurs in the environment, you know, through lightning strikes, the earth being struck with lightning millions of times a day. Here's a picture hitting the Eiffel Tower. Here's Tesla's free energy station that he set up when he was alive, and it's even showing electricity held by animal fur. And of course, we know the Egyptians love their cats. They found over 1 million mummified cats in Egypt. But there's a reason why they had cats around, and we're going to see that. Here are some pictures of the Earth with its own electromagnetic field. There is this electromagnetism and this toroidal flow occurrence around the Earth. Matter of fact, I'll get into this a bit more, but what we think is gravity, that it's gravity that holds us to the Earth, is actually magnetism. Science thinks, you know, that the Earth's turning somehow creates this gravitational force, but they can't explain why an orbiting of a planet has this gravitational force. It's because it's not. It's magnetism that draws things in. What causes magnetism? Well, for one thing, friction. And where's the friction coming? If you've got an orbiting body, that's going to create friction, which is going to create magnetism. And there's naturally occurring electricity throughout the universe. So this is how it works. It's electromagnetism that draws things down, and it's electricity that draws things out. It's the polarity of this. Here we've got the god Amun, which is a derivation of Amen, is in this chamber. You can see this chamber here. You'd say a hermetically sealed chamber. He's in this bark or this boat. So he's in a higher space, and it's showing this coiled thing around. It's a snake, but it's actually representing a charge, something of an electric charge that's going on here. Egyptologists call this child's jewelry, like a little child's crown they could put on their head and pretend they're king or something like that. But we have these things called Leyden jars, where hanging from a string in a jar, you have 2 pieces of metal foil, could be gold or some kind of foil. It will start to move. These metal pieces will start to move when an electrical storm is moving in. It will sense the heightening of electricity in the atmosphere well in advance of you actually having the storm. These things will move because of their sensitivity to ambient electrical energy in the atmosphere. And because they're in a hermetically sealed container, you can see there's a plug here and the string running through, it's sealed, it builds up a charge within the container and reacts to it. Here's a picture of a pharaoh holding, they're called scepters, but they're really conductive rods. And this even looks like a lightning rod, different shapes for being able to connect to the electricity in the atmosphere and conduct it down to the earth, conduct it through themselves. Why do you want to do that? We'll talk about that in a minute. Here he's talking about how the human hand generates electricity. And here's a photograph, curling photograph of a hand showing the concentration of energies in different parts of it. Same here with pictures of the human aura showing its layers, the different layers of energy. Here we have the use of the hands. Here we've got, in the middle we have Osiris, a very significant god in Egyptian mythology, and on the one side Horus, on the other side Isis, with their hands, not touching, but close, where they're holding Horus within a particular field. You'll notice these peaked hats. Those aren't just, a fashion statement. Maybe your hat's a fashion statement, but the Egyptians were wearing them for very practical reasons. Same thing here. We see, remember doing the Egyptian power pose at the beginning? There they were doing it. Holding this, an initiate in the middle there. They've all got their peaked caps connecting to something above. This is going to become significant as we go forward. Someone using their hands here to do Reiki, not actually touching the body. What are you going to do with not touching the body? Don't you have to touch the body? Well, no, you don't have to touch the body, because the hands can emit energy that can affect the energy field of the person, because there's layers, right? We just saw that. Here's a picture showing the electrical pathways that are used in acupuncture. Painting from this is actually from a doctor's tomb, a physician's tomb, showing working with the hands, doing healing practices. There's an interesting hieroglyph from these hieroglyphs are more than just pretty pictures. James Ernst Brown really says that these are technical manuals. They were the Egyptians' technical manuals, that they inscribed these things on the walls where initiation practices would take place over centuries. So this is how the knowledge got passed down. Like, this was passed from generation to generation to generation over centuries. So they would have their technical manuals on the inside of the temples and so forth, with the instructions on how these positioning of the hands and so forth could affect different things. They had incredible knowledge of anatomy and the energy field, and working physically to invoke things spiritually, energetically, electromagnetically, all of the above. A couple of pictures here. These hands going up to the sky. Of course, the sun disk, there's Ra. So all energy comes from the sun. All electricity comes from the sun. The sun is actually, they say it's just gas, but it's actually more electric. Gas is part of it, but it's emitting, well, it's actually drawing electricity from the surrounding area, and that's what lights it up. Also combined with the gas transfusion and so forth. So this connection to that through the limbs. And then here, James Ernst Brown is showing ceremonies are being done. An initiate here in the middle with the cap. On top is peak cap. And people doing the power poses. Here's some of the electric rod to hold a charge. You can notice these things being held here, which you'll notice there's a series of discs. We'll talk about that. It's a series of discs there. It's actually an ankh. The oval, and then this crossbar, and then these discs, and then they're emitting. These things emit out the bottom. Got something similar to that here, a Jed Waj with discs. It emits out the bottom. I'll pass that around later. And the other thing to notice is how this initiate in the middle is off the ground, not grounded to the earth. Everybody else is grounded to the earth, but not the one in the middle. Why? All right, electrical capacitors. These things, somehow along the way, Egyptologists started referring to these as hand mirrors. They're hand mirrors that people would use as mirrors. Well, they're not going to work very well as a mirror, as you can tell. You're not going to see much in that. So they're not hand mirrors, even though they're called hand mirrors. It's because you call something something doesn't make it that. But they call it that because they don't know what it is. But in fact, they are energy capacitors. These are metal discs, often held. This one here is on a removable wooden handle. And it makes this metal disc into an electrical capacitor. And this one in the middle is actually an electrical capacitor that he said he purchased at Edmunds Scientific Store. And you can go and buy one at a science store. It's designed to capture static electricity to be discharged somewhere else. So this was a way to gather ambient static electricity, store it, hold it, and use it for some kind of purpose, which we'll look at. And technical manuals, right? Okay, here's an artifact from ancient Egypt. Again, a wooden handle holding this metal disc, and on it has a drawing, which he's enlarged here, which is instructions on how to use it. So people 2,000 years later know what this is, and they don't pick it up and go, oh, what is that, a hand mirror? No, this is an electrical capacitor. There's a lot going on in this picture here, but you'll notice the main thing, well, there's, this rod, and this person's off the ground, not grounded to the earth. This is interesting. This is King Tut's chair, Tutankhamun's chair, which is covered with gold foil, which is very conductive. It'll hold electrical energy, but the bottom of it has wooden pegs at the bottom of the legs, so it's not grounded to the earth, so it can hold a charge. It won't discharge into the earth. It'll hold a charge. And on the back of it, again, is the technical instructions, which he enlarged here. Showing the person sitting here, their feet's off the ground, but the person here is grounded, doing the Egyptian power pose, charging this person up with electric, etheric, magical energy. I hate to use the word electromagnetic because it really reduces it to something mechanical sounding. You can get electricity out of your wall socket, but this is something of a higher nature, as we're going to see. This is something that really is supporting higher consciousness. And speaking of higher consciousness, you can see this person's wearing this type of cap, which is reminiscent of those Leyland jars, right? The foil things hanging down that would pick up electrical charge in the atmosphere. So around the head is picking that up, holding it. Same here, there's this connection. Well, we'll talk about the upper chakras in a moment, but you know, there's certainly a need to connect upward in doing this. This also here kind of looks like a, well, it doesn't kind of look like, it does look like a capacitor, right? Like those mirrors, this round thing here with this flange at the top, and then these kind of disc things that would discharge down. So this person is connected to this thing, this capacitor behind her, able to pick that up along with earth energies, magnetism, and then discharge it into this person here to amplify their field. Okay, here we got some interesting pictures because they actually show these so-called hand mirrors, these capacitors underneath the wooden stool, or the whatever this is made out of. Yeah, so-called hand mirror under the chair. It's the electrical capacitor, so it's holding this energy and helping with the amplification of the field here. You can see them here as well. He's got it circled in red. Again here, this energy capacitor. High technology. Here we get into a ceremonial chamber. A chamber, you could call it hermetically sealed. To be sealed in here fits the profile of a Faraday cage. Faraday cages were invented by Michael Faraday back in 1836, where these Faraday cages were containers, hermetically sealed containers that would be lined with a metallic surface, so ambient energies couldn't pass in and they couldn't pass out. So whatever was in there would be charged up and hold a charge. It wouldn't discharge. So I would imagine initiation ceremonies would take place in here in a heightened state of energy to allow for a heightened state of consciousness. There's another variation here of a Faraday cage of these gold-covered chambers. It's got this wooden thing here, the wooden base where the feet would go, so you wouldn't be discharging into the earth. This is interesting because, again, it shows these discs or arrays, which are significant, as we will see when we get into our demonstration in a moment. These layers of things that kind of act as storage and transducers of the energy that's being worked with. Here's a pyramidion, something that sits at the top of a pyramid, again showing someone in a Faraday cage, or you know, a sealed chamber. And here you've got temple workers or neophytes that are in the power pose, holding the space energetically, spiritually, electromagnetically. There's a lot in here, but you can see these capacitors here, power pose, feet off the ground. These are quite likely blue lotus flowers. They worked with the blue lotus psychoactive substance, entheogen, to aid in the alternative state. And of course, look at in this sealed chamber to heighten the charge and the consciousness. Holding an ankh, which is an emitter, not just a good luck charm, but it's an emitter. Connection to Ra. More technical manuals, more of these arrays, a series of arrays, transducing from above down. And here's the hook and flail. Sometimes people think that those are instruments of submission, of slaves, but they're actually energy tools, are used for kind of endowsing and sensing energy and moving energy around. Here's a sensor. We'll look at the sensor here in a moment. Something of an energy collector. As we can see here, we've got the god Min, M-I-N, with a big erection. You want to talk about electricity in the body.
I thought it was cord.
No, this,
Sorry.
look here.
It seemed like a husk. I was like, oh, cord, food.
Well, this is lettuce. This is apparently lettuce.
Okay, that's what I was looking at, those two.
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
this is an erection here.
Yes, okay.
You want to talk about electricity? I call it erectricity in the body. That this is one of the benefits of heightening the charge, the ethers, and so forth. Is it enhances vitality, fertility, virility. And if you were going to be a pharaoh or a king, you had to prove your virility, that you were going to produce offspring, strong offspring. And so, you know, part of your path of initiation was being tested and proving that. And in this case, yeah, there would be an ejaculation onto this lettuce. There's a certain kind of lettuce that was used for fertility. And I'm not sure if it was consumed or what, but this is the god Min. Now you might be asking, why is a god having an erection? Well, you have to understand that people identified themselves with the god. Like even after somebody died, they then would be referred to as Osiris. Osiris being the god of the dead. So the dead would be referred to as Osiris, so that they were connecting to Osiris. It's the same with Christians. They identify with Christ, Christ in you, that you are a part of Christ. And so this is why, you know, they would have Min as the one with the erection. There's another one here. You can see there's his head, his body, and this erection, and he's ejaculating into this instrument to catch the life force, power from the phallus. Sometimes they think this is an incense burner, but it's actually used in gathering sperm as part of a ritual. Here we are again with the god with an erection and these stars showing the planetary forces. He's in a contained environment. There's the power pose there, the electric projective. These are technical manuals for each generation of priesthood to follow. And again, now this is the last one, I believe, showing a pharaoh lying down. He's in this contained area. He's lying down on, this is called a sled bed, where it's got wooden legs. It's shaped like a cat, like a lion, and has a lion skin on it, because cat fur holds a charge. I'm sure you know that quite well. When you brush your cat, it really charges it up. And underneath this sled bed are these different caps, which are working as capacitors. The caps are capacitors under the cat capacitor. Yeah, to charge things up, because James Ernst Brown says this would be part of a ritual. What does he call it? The electro ejaculation procedure. That the sperm would be charged up and then ejaculated and utilized.
Utilized for what?
Well, perhaps consumed. Well, that's a great question, and he, in this book, if you want to get a copy of this book, he talks about how it could actually be used for atomic transmutation. He gets really deep into this, how the Egyptians were aware of atomic energy and the atom. I didn't really point it out, but there was these tables with round discs on them and dots in the middle. that he says was their symbolism of the atom, and that bringing charged semen into contact with things on these, he calls magical tables, would bring about atomic transmutation of things. I believe they were practicing tantra and a lot of yoga, and this is what's kind of growing out of my work and the writing is, and looking at the Great Pyramid in particular, was they knew how to manipulate and harness these forces. The pyramid was emulating someone doing yoga, if I can put it that way. But anyways, it's not only about not ejaculating, but it's also being more proactive to heighten the concentration of energies in the body. So the Jing would be even more powerful. And ultimately it's about consciousness. Because Jing in Chinese medicine, Jing gets transformed into Qi, and Qi gets transformed into Shen, called the three treasures. And Shen is consciousness, spiritual consciousness. So it's all based really on the quality of sexual energy and how it's managed. And the Egyptians knew how to do that, as we can see here. We're going to, here's these 2 pages here. I've got my 5 volunteers here tonight to do an experiment that James Ernst Brown puts in his book here. You guys had a little look through these pages. And we're going to do it here. I'm going to turn the camera and we're going to set up a chair here in the middle of the living room, which has to be pointed west. The person on the chair is going to be facing west. So 1 person on the chair and 4 people around. And you can take turns. Whoever wants to sit in the chair can have their turn. But the 4 people around, there's a certain procedure, and I'll guide that. It's not that complicated, but it's has to be followed in a certain pattern. And what we're going to do first of all is try lifting the person without doing the procedure, and then we'll do the procedure and then lift the person. All right, so just relax your hands. People get into position A, B, C, and D. So yeah, you can try. Well, first of all, let's just do it before doing the procedure. Get your hands there, and 1, 2, 3, lift. Okay, great.
So did I know? No.
Right, so person A, left hand first. Person B,
My eyes closed.
it doesn't matter with the eyes. Person C, left hand. D, all right, Joanna, your right hand. Get right in there. Holding it. Do you feel anything, Devin?
Yeah, I feel a lot of energy coming into the crowd.
Feel a lot of energy coming.
Yeah, like I know it's almost like pressure. They're good?
Okay, so slowly. First person D, that's you, Jen. Just slowly, one at a time. Next.
Sorry.
Daria. Next, slowly. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Okay, and go right into it.
And up.
1, 2, 3, up.
Yeah.
Feeling lighter.
Yeah.
We came off the chair.
Okay. Okay, take your time.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. Okay, first try it without.
ABCD.
No, without, just without the procedure. One, 2, 3, lift.
1, 2, 3.
She's already the light.
Did we get you off?
Yeah.
Did we get you off?
already?
She's on the
Came up a little
clouds.
bit.
Okay, then.
No, you might be able to
Came up a
lift
bit.
her, you know.
We gotta get her up high then.
Okay.
Mhm. All right, so want to take a moment
All right.
to charge your hands. Ground it to the earth. And then A, B, left hand C, D, A again, B, C, D. Make sure they're aligned, so it's like one straight line of arrays. Actually say how long, but let's go for a minute to see if that makes it even more effective. I'm curious.
Kind of hard to.
I know, my hand is just.
Okay, so then D remove. That's Devin, slowly. Just maintaining. Okay, and now hand positions. And 1, 2, 3, lift.
Oh,
Wow. Okay.
That was a lot.
So longer, it makes it more
That
effective.
was powerful.
Wow.
I
that
felt
was
that.
awesome.
Nice.
Like sparks or something.
You want to try it?
Okay. No,
You want to be able to say you did this.
It
Nope.
it was really interesting. So when the energy was
Okay.
coming in, it literally felt like there was this like dome over my
Mhm.
head, and it was like pulsating and getting like really strong, and I could feel it going into the crown. And then it was as if like when you said like stay for the minute, like it like instantly just got stronger, and it was as if like there was like an inner pendulum, like just like into like the middle of the crown, and I could feel it like etherically like moving.
Nice.
That pulse, and then I wasn't expecting to like go so high.
Yeah.
And like as like I could see like in the camera like it going up, it was like felt like I was like up.
Gonna go through the ceiling.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was cool.
Okay, we're getting it.
So I think that like little extra like
Mhm.
5 seconds of staying like, really charges up more
Yeah.
energy. To, like,
I would think the
sign up,
longer is going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'cause I'm not that light. So
All right. So try it without the procedure. So get your hands together to lift her. See what it feels like. 1, 2, 3, lift. Okay.
No.
no.
All right.
Sorry, I'm so sweaty.
Procedure. Left hand A. B. C. D. Right hand A. Go ahead. E. C. D. And yeah, let's see how long we can hold this comfortably. Keeping this array intact. Good? I think we're good. All right, slowly, one at a time, and get ready to lift. 1, 2, 3, lift. Canada's wonderland right here.
Weird.
That was your experience? Weird.
Well, I could feel like a lot of pressure on my crown when all the hands were there, just like pushing. And when all the hands came off, like it was almost like disconnecting me. And then when all the hands came off, like light, like reconnecting me or something.
The hands felt like a disconnection
Mhm.
and then a reconnection.
Yeah, and the hands came away. And I also felt when the hands were on, like down here, something happening, but I don't know what exactly.
Okay.
Like, actually, like this is where I started to feel lighter. I felt like a lightness happening here.
Yeah, that's how I felt too.
Okay.
Like sacral or
Okay. Right.
I don't know, somewhere here, like in the like lower dantian, something like.
Well, that's interesting. We'll talk about this after we'll break. But
Okay,
One
I
more
will
time?
give the directions. Okay. Yes.
okay, try to see how heavy I am to begin with.
1, 2, 3, go.
I guess it's important to keep your legs stiff, though, eh? Like you don't want to.
No, not even.
No?
They said just relax. Yeah, you don't have
Alright.
to.
All right. Left hand is person A. B. C. D. Right hand.
All right, you know the drill. Keep them there for about a minute. Okay, now in reverse order. And... Yeah!
Ryan!
Wow,
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, so
That's
Very
awesome.
cool.
How do you feel?
I could really feel the field get charged up, like everything. My
Is
whole
this-
body, right down through my legs.
This is charging up. It's supposed to be charging up.
Yeah, I still feel it. Actually, I feel like I'm floating still.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm in the air.
Actually, me too, so a little bit.
I feel like my etheric and my physical have kind of separate out a little bit from being charged up. Like the amplification is making the other one more aware of it. And I'm feeling the imprint of being lifted, like, initiated into a higher state in the.
Thank you, guys.
But I would suggest also keeping the legs
Okay.
somewhat firm, like
Yeah, they were. I think it's like
So
keep
they
your
don't-
feet on the
they don't-
ground or just like relax.
so they don't flop. Like keep them somewhat stiff.
Stiff?
Well, yeah, relax, but just
Okay.
like don't let them like flop up. Like hold them.
Okay.
Try that, anyways. So let's try lifting Daria.
1, 2, 3. We're all just a little bit lighter now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Three, 2, 1, go.
Wow.
What is that? Like, every time we do it, it gets more powerful.
Yeah.
Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, I still feel the same thing, like almost like I'm in a lucid dream trying to fly. I am up, I feel above the ground. And my upper chakras feels like activated, but I didn't feel any something in the down. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
Feel
all.
lighter.
So before we get into directly addressing what this was about, I just want to introduce some more concepts that can help us in our discussion and understanding. Drawing from the work of one of my teachers, Dr. Robert Gilbert. Dr. Robert J. Gilbert, PhD, book Egyptian and European Energy Work. There's a picture of Dr. Gilbert, who I studied with him back around 2010, going down to his institute in Asheville, North Carolina, the Bessica Institute, Bessica.org. I think he's one of the best teachers on the planet. Learned so much from him, including biogeometry. I studied with him. Really a master of both vibrational science and spiritual science. He's really put them together very well. And so, yeah, just going to point to some things in this book of his that are important biogeometry concepts. Starting with this picture here of the Earth and the Sun. I don't know if you can see that too well, but it shows the Earth and the light of the Sun and how the light comes in, and when it hits the Earth, certain parts of the light stop short. As you can see, the colors on top, the frequencies on top, and some of it in the middle goes all the way through. Certain parts of the light can penetrate further than other parts of the light. So that's the first picture I want to show you. And then how if you cut the Earth in half, you'd have a hemisphere. And again, it shows how light coming through the top of the hemisphere, some parts of the light is at the top, and some of them makes it further down the sides, and some of them makes it all the way to the bottom. I'm not going to explain what these different letters mean, but they refer to different aspects of light. Half an Earth, hemisphere. And then this is just showing some of the work of some French vibrational scientists working with stacking hemispheres. Because certain parts of the light would make it to the bottom, and then into the next hemisphere, and next hemisphere, and next hemisphere, all the way through. Other parts would be blocked. So the stuff that makes it all the way to the bottom is actually potentized. It's amplified. So stacking hemispheres like that becomes an array of disks, in a way, disk hemispheres that amplify light energy. An ankh So you've got a sphere on top, and then the one of them has these disks, as you can see, arrays, and emitting at the bottom. Those stacked disks or arrays, it's sometimes referred to as a battery. A battery of disks that can hold, amplify, and discharge energy as a battery is intended to do. So that's sometimes referred to as a battery that emits electrical or etheric energy. So yeah, I've also got examples of that with this Jed watch that shakes, but it's got these batteries, these disks. So it turns it into an emitter. It has nothing to do with what it's made out of. It's made out of wood. But you can pass it around, you can see if you can sense something coming at the bottom. Same with this pendulum. This is a pendulum that was developed by Dr. Ibrahim Karim, called the ICA, or the Ibrahim Karim Universal Pendulum. And again, it's got the disc creating a battery of energy and an emitter. So again, you can play with that. It can be used for different purposes, including healing. Or, yeah, subtle energy, harnessing subtle energy.
Like healing for me.
Yeah. You can speed up the healing of a cut, bruises, breaks. That's one of its things. So, yeah, how does that apply to what we were doing there? We had somebody sitting in a chair and we created this array of hands over the head, creating a battery of energy, but they were like hemispheres, you could say. So light energy that comes from above, some parts of the light was being blocked by the hands, and other parts of the light was making it all the way down into the field of the person sitting in the chair. So the frequencies we wanted, make it all the way down, made it down or amplified, which then amplified certain aspects of your energy field, which overcomes gravity. Like I said, gravity is a misnomer. We think it's gravity, but it actually is overcoming magnetism. The electric light energy overcame the magnetism that holds us to the earth. That's why you became lighter. It wasn't about anti-gravity, it was about anti-magnetism that pulls down and the electric pulls up. It's doing something physical in the physical space that does something in the counter space, the etheric space. So it was like etherical arts, etherical magic, where the forces, the electric forces that produce levity could have more sway than the magnetic forces that have this effect of gravity. And bring it back around to this thing of the Great Giza Pyramid, which is the center of my work in the book. The title is called The Key to the Great Living Pyramid of Giza. The key to the Great Living Pyramid of Giza. The last couple of pictures I'll show you. This is getting pretty esoteric, but here we see a hemisphere, like you saw before, and how certain parts of light, which, well, you could even say certain parts of electricity, certain aspects of electricity, because Rudolf Steiner says that electricity is, he calls it decayed light. Light that's decaying and coming into a different form than light. It becomes electricity. So certain parts of electricity that hit the top of the hemisphere, and of course, the hemisphere represents a pyramid. A pyramid is holding the same kind of space as a hemisphere. So the light that hits the top of the pyramid, some of it decays into electricity that can penetrate all the way through. And here, Dr. Gilbert's showing that a little bit left of center is what's known as the pi ray. Pi, that's an angle, a mathematical thing. It says 6 degrees, 15 inches off of the center is the pi ray. And that's a particularly important force that's coming out of light that goes through the hemisphere and out the bottom. Now, I'm going to switch it over here, and this might blow your mind, showing this pi ray hitting what's called the relieving chambers or the resonating chambers that are above the so-called King's Chamber in the Great Giza Pyramid. Right, that's the King's Chamber here, and you see where those arrows are. That's the sarcophagus, where initiation would take place, where the initiate would be laying there in the temple suite, and how this pi ray is coming at an angle through these 5 chambers, the 5 chambers above the King's, so-called King's Chamber, and hits the sarcophagus, which is an explanation as to why the King's Chamber is not in the middle of the pyramid. Right? It's not directly down the center. You'd think, oh, this is the heart of the pyramid. You would think it would be right in the middle. Like, did they miss the shot or something? It's off center. Well, it is the heart of the pyramid. And is your heart in the center? No. Your heart's a little off center as well. So is the heart of the pyramid. It's a little off center, so it can catch the pi ray, this important aspect of the spectrum of light that's coming through the top and center, but it comes at a particular angle. Same with us. It comes down the middle, but certain aspects are going to hit the heart differently. The divine design of this, there's an important reason why the heart's not in the center. And I'll get into more of this in the book, when the chapter on why the heart is not a pump. I'll also point out that those are 5 chambers above the king's chamber. There's a nice correlation with the research I've done into how there's actually 5 chakras above the head. You get your crown chakra, but then there's 5 chakras above the head. The Egyptians built 5 chambers above the initiation chamber. So why? Why is this pyrite hitting at an angle? And why were we experiencing what we were experiencing? It wasn't so much about the physical body. You know, the initiation wasn't about physical death. It was actually about kind of the death of the astral body. This pyrite hitting the sarcophagus would allow the astral body to come out of the physical body, that the anti-gravity forces or the electric forces would lift the astral body out of the physical body. And as I taught in the talk on Egyptian initiation, they were inducing a near-death experience, where there'd be a separation of the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the spirit self out. And so this pyrite would be the drug that would do it. It's the right angle, and everything's proportionally right. And that's what we were experiencing here. We set up this series of arrays, batteries that allowed certain forces to reach down to your center, creating a separation between your physical, your etheric, astral, spirit self, so that the forces of magnetism that holds the physical body for the earth were overcome temporarily. And the physical body was detached from the magnetic field of the earth. Just wanted to add another point here, so I have it on the recording as well, that is about electricity, and how Rudolf Steiner says that electricity is exactly the same as what human thought is. That what we call electricity is the same substance of which thoughts are made of, which is explaining one of the reasons why the brain runs on electricity. The brain is associated with thought activity. The brain doesn't actually think, but the brain transmits thoughts from higher levels into the body. So the electricity in the body is what he says is the same substance as thought energy. So that's partly what they were doing with these, inducing the Great Pyramid and whatnot, this concentration of the light energy of the universe was allowing them to engage with higher thoughts, higher consciousness, higher intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, it's all energy, right? And it's all how we direct it, and we're learning practices and procedures on how to direct it in specific ways that can harness it for all sorts of purposes. This was just a demonstration of how we can do things that are scientifically unexplainable. They don't have any concepts to explain it, but we've seen that it's possible. And I'm trying to articulate how it worked based on the direction of and concentration of certain forces of light, thought, energy, electricity. Yeah, we do need to disconnect somewhat from the earth and get more connected to the cosmic intelligence. Like we're still connected kind of to the animal.
Cosmic intelligence?
Our animal nature is horizontal, right? The animals turn to the earth. We're trying to overcome this turn to the earth and turn once again back up to cosmic intelligence from which we're born. but we dove down into matter through kind of mineral, plant, animal, and so the human is really in this process of trying to come up as an antenna, like a pyramid. And these are practices that will accelerate that.
So is electricity like neutral, or is electricity like divine energy, divine spirit?
Is electricity neutral or divine? Well, again, I don't like using the word electricity because it does make it sound kind of like it's mechanical, but it's certainly divine in origin. And, you know, the sun is not only emitting electrical rays, they're full of wisdom. We're having wisdom bombarded really at our heart all the time. The question is, can we decode it and interpret and integrate the coding of light that comes by electricity? Divine light
is
is via.
magnetism divine then?
Yeah, it's part of the polarity. The divine splits itself into polarity so that it can have the dialogue, the dynamic of dialogue. So electricity and magnetism are two sides of the same coin working together. How to live it day by day, you know, it takes developing the organs, it takes developing the chakras, it takes developing the battery of 5 chakras above the head. You know, it is about evolving organs as capacitors and transducers. Otherwise, we are kind of groping in the dark, and that's why, you know, we need to do practices to develop these things so that we can make use of the information that's constantly coming at us from light. Lots to contemplate.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Thumbs up.
Thank you.
delighted how this turned out. So, is this going to work?